So this project is about improvisation. The way I constructed it was I got a group of musicians, fabulous improvisers in George Lewis, in Paul Grabowsky and Mark Helias, all fantastic and world-renowned improvisers. And I got them together without any pre-existing composition. So we walked into the studio with a blank canvas. We're investigating how we develop the idea. And this idea is in the moment reflection, but as we go through the process of the day, we discuss what's occurred, and in a way that sort of informs in some way what happens next. For example, I did a duet with George, and he said, I'm just trying to go on to the next idea. I'm not going to be stationary on an idea. So you play something, and I'm just trying to change it up. For me, I'm in this flow. So in a way, it's instantaneous reflection and reflection after the fact, and then and observe what's happened, and then situate it in an artistic research project.
Basically, I think for me, any kind of improvisation involves a combination of agency and indeterminacy. And indeterminacy becomes very important because you don't know what's coming. You don't even know what you are going to do to some extent. You have a lot of intention, but then there's this moment of choice. And that moment of choice I generally regard as ineffable. That is, you don't really know. You can justify it after the fact, or you can try to rationalize before the fact. But in the moment, you're just there and you commit. So there are those three elements that are very important. Agency, indeterminacy, choice. And then the last one is the analysis of the conditions. So what you're doing is you're responding to the sonic environment. Quite a bit of the time, I feel that I can tell from the sounds that I'm hearing, goal states, desires, intentions, things people want to do, things people don't want to do, directions which the music might go or would prefer that they go. And then I'm free to kind of make my own decision about that. Maybe I agree, but we're in a process of negotiation. And the negotiation is expressed in sound. And if people are attuned to that, they can hear the negotiations. It's not going to be very difficult for them. And I think there's a certain kind of aesthetic pleasure in listening to music as negotiation rather than sitting in judgment on sounds and deciding whether you like them or dislike them, or they wash over you and you capture yourself as kind of a passive person.
The process is, I'm theoretically, it's always this time idea that you're trying to be in the moment and respond to everything, and yet there's a timeline going, and it's impressions of sort of concurrence of events and connecting with other musicians or with sounds that I'm getting. Because in this case, we're actually processing everything through headphones. So I basically close my eyes and listen to the landscape and work in that. I was talking to George earlier because we were discussing a lot of these ideas of improvisation and the sort of background intelligence that's going on when you're improvising, and it's not intuition and it's not psychic. It's just we're not sure what the brain function. I have this theory that there are multiple brain function levels going on that we maybe are not aware of that are happening in the background. A sort of intelligence happening in the background that quantifies this sort of arc of time while we're concentrating on the moment, so that the arc of time is being taken care of somehow, but we're not aware of it in a conscious way. Although maybe for shorter, he was saying how, in some of the shorter periods you might be aware of that, but for the long arc of, let's say, a 20-minute improvisation, you're going moment to moment. But somehow there's a coherence to it, and that's the thing that mystifies me, is how we do that. Because in the sort of Western European mind, you're supposed to be very sort of conscious intellectually of what's happening at all times. And in this kind of work, you're conscious of what you're doing, but you can't be distracted by what happened in the past per se. In a conscious way, it kind of takes you out of what you're doing. So I guess there's a state of trust that everything's working out, and you just concentrate deeply on what you're doing at the moment.
Let's say this thing gets recorded and released on some CD or something, okay? Even so, when you first listen to that, your experience in terms of listening is pretty much identical to the experience of the people making the music. So when they played it, they were hearing it for the first time. And you listening to it for the first time are also listening to it for the first time. So everyone is hearing it for the first time. So there's a sense of empathy that can be built around that, which is another source of pleasure. So what I do is I try to take positions with respect to what I'm hearing. It might be an oppositional position, very simply, or it might be a conciliatory position, or it might be a questioning position, or it might be a critical position. But all of those are expressed in the sound. So once we learn to hear those positions, I think that's part of what listening to improvisation is all about, we begin to realize why improvisation is not really limited to the musical or artistic domains, but is an everyday condition of everyday life that of which what we're doing is just a subset.
In order for improvisation to be successful, I think that there are three really important criteria. The first and most obvious one is that the instrumentalists need to be able to play very well, because you can't really be an effective improviser if you don't know your instrument well enough to be able to make it do your bidding. And the more you're able to make it work for you, the greater your range of expressive possibilities. The second really important thing is trust. You've got to be able to trust the other players, because improvising is a very exposed situation. And if you're improvising in a group, you've really got to make sure that whatever you do is at the service of what they're doing, and vice versa. And the basic kind of psychological state for that to be able to be most effective is a trust which is happening between the players, that there is no doubt in their minds that whatever they're doing, it's going to be in relation to what the other people are doing, and there's going to be a mutual sense of working together to achieve a combined result. And therefore the third thing is a corollary of that, which is the sublimation of the ego into something which is bigger than the sum of its parts, that we're all here to create something together, to make a work. It doesn't belong to anybody, it belongs to all of us. And in a sense it belongs to the recording engineer, it belongs to everybody who's witnessed it, it belongs to the room. All of these things, all these mysterious and obscure things all play a role in whatever comes out the other end. So that's the way I understand the process. It's quite different from conventional jazz playing, which often is about role playing. You have a soloist and a rhythm section, and there is a tremendous sense of a singularity about that, of the soloist really feeling that the rhythm section needs to be at that person's service, and that it's really all about the solo statement. But I think in this kind of collective playing, it's almost the reverse of that, where we're trying to kind of create something which none of us can claim ownership of, and yet all of us can feel that we are a part of it, we belong to it.
There are two things I think that each member brings to this ensemble, and that's expertise and creativity. I found it incredibly interesting to be able to work with the machine, because what George is doing is he's taking my ideas and processing them and feeding them back to me, but manipulating them in such a way that I'm not dealing with the individual sound of each note. That process gives it a sonic transformation. So my feedback to that is I have a different approach. It's fresh, it's in the moment. It's something I haven't experienced before. So in relation to the other improvisers within the group, we have this fresh understanding or fresh ability to interact, and I find that that's what makes this project very, very special for me.
A few years ago, a couple of wonderful people from a group called 48 Nord in Munich reintroduced me to live electronic performance. I sort of gave that up because people like Richard Teitelbaum that I was playing with were doing it very much better than I was. But then in the digital realm, and people like Lyle Ellis, the bassist, showed me, and 48 Nord, that's Ulrich Müller and Siggy Russert, showed me how I could integrate my practice as a acoustic musician playing the trombone with the new tools that were coming out for live performance. That like Ableton Live was their preference, and I still think of myself as a kind of an Ableton Live disc jockey. I'm playing little sound clips from time to time. I'm sampling and transforming the sounds of the other players and myself. But other than that, that's what I'm doing. Is I'm trying to do the same kinds of things that I'm doing in my... There's no difference between the electronic approach and the acoustic approach. I'm still taking critical positions. I'm still trying to harmonize my work with what everyone else is doing. I'm trying to be a little bit opportunistic about listening for certain sounds and realizing, well, I can enhance those sounds, or I could multiply them, or I could somehow imitate them in a way where no one might really know who's making which sound. I can become kind of a shapeshifter that way. And so the electronics allow me to do that. I also have a number of little magic plungers, like the regular kind of bathroom plungers that trombonists always use, that have microphones in them, practice mutes that have microphones in them, and that allow me to sort of, if I need to, suppress the sound of the trombone and make it be totally acoustic, or radically transform the sound of the trombone. And in a way, it goes back to being around people like Eddie Harris, who used to do this with the Echoplexes and in Chicago, and he was very well known for doing that. It was probably a pretty strong influence on Miles Davis. Certainly he was doing it before Miles Davis was. And so being around people like that, and that takes you back to 1964, or in my case 1974 when I first met him, it means that you have a really rich legacy to draw from in doing this kind of work.
The electronic component, it's been fascinating. I've done things in the past where it wasn't as fascinating, but the sonic stuff that he was doing was great. And it's really like we have a little fader on our mixers that is the FX, basically the electronic, and it's just like this other instrument that's there. So I'm interacting with this ensemble, and that happens to be one portion of the ensemble. And it was some wonderful sounds to interact with. Also, because he's processing us, so you might hear yourself come back transmuted, and then you're interacting with yourself in a transmuted form. It's kind of interesting.
Well, I think the way George plays the computer, and I really feel that that's what he's doing, he's playing it like an instrument. And I feel that it's another voice in the ensemble. You could call any instrument some kind of a machine. A piano is a machine, absolutely. It's a very mechanical kind of thing. I depress a key, and there are many, many things that happen in order for the sound to come out. It's quite complicated. If you have a look at what's behind one keystroke on a piano, there's a lot of components to get that thing to work. So I don't really see any difference in principle, between something which is a digital piece of software or something which is based on algorithms and something which is purely mechanical. It's about the brain of the person who is utilising that and their ability to make it an expressive tool. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that George is doing that all the time. He's applying his improvisational skill to manipulating those sounds in real time. So I don't see any kind of contradiction in a creative sense between the moment, the capturing of the sound, and its reintroduction into the conversation.